In a world that constantly challenges your patience, self-control, and emotional balance, developing emotional mastery is no longer optional. It's essential. Every single day, you encounter people and situations that test your inner calm. Stressful work environments where deadlines loom and expectations multiply. Family tensions that resurface old wounds and unspoken resentments. Social pressures that demand you be someone you're not. Personal disappointments that shake your confidence and question your worth. These moments arrive uninvited. They test you. They push you. They ask, who are you when everything feels out of control? And in those moments, most people react. They snap, they withdraw, they overthink. They carry the weight of every interaction, every criticism, every perceived slight. They live at the mercy of their emotions, and they wonder why peace feels so elusive, why calm seems impossible, why emotional balance feels like a distant dream. But there is another way. A way that doesn't require you to suppress what you feel. A way that doesn't ask you to pretend everything is fine when it's not. A way that honors your emotions while giving you complete mastery over them. This is the path of emotional resilience, the path of the unshakable mind, the emotionally unshakable. Mind is a guide to transforming your emotional world from reactivity to resilience. It teaches you how to stay centered and unbothered no matter what happens. Not by suppressing emotions, but by understanding and mastering them. Because emotions are not your enemy. They never were. They are messengers, signals, information about what matters to you, what threatens you, what needs your attention. The problem isn't that you feel. The problem is that you've never learned to feel without losing yourself in the feeling. You've never learned to experience anger without becoming anger, to feel fear without being consumed by fear, to notice sadness without drowning in sadness. This distinction, between experiencing emotion and being controlled by it, is everything. It's the difference between a life of chaos and a life of peace. Between relationships that drain you and relationships that nourish you. Between a mind that torments you and a mind that serves you. And the beautiful truth, this mastery is learnable, trainable, available to anyone willing to do the inner work. You don't need to be naturally calm. You don't need a perfect childhood. You don't need ideal circumstances. You just need awareness, practice, and the understanding that your brain is far more flexible than you've been led to believe. And while neuroscience has revealed something profound, your brain is not fixed. It's plastic, changeable, constantly rewiring itself based on what you practice most. Every time you react with anger, you strengthen the neural pathways of anger. Every time you spiral into anxiety, you deepen the grooves of worry. But every time you pause before responding, you build new pathways of emotional control. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you reshape your brain toward calm and clarity. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain literally reshaping itself based on your choices, your attention, your practice. And this means something revolutionary. You are not stuck with the emotional patterns you inherited or developed. You can change them, rewire them, transform them. The anxious mind can become calm. The reactive temperament can become measured. The emotionally overwhelmed person can become emotionally resilient, not overnight, not through one insight or one technique, but through consistent practice, through patient repetition, through the commitment to become someone new. This audiobook is your guide on that journey. It will teach you how emotions work, not just psychologically, but neurologically. You'll understand what happens in your brain when you feel triggered, stressed, or overwhelmed. You'll learn practical techniques to regulate your nervous system, to create space between stimulus and response, to remain calm even when everything around you is chaotic. You'll discover how to transform your relationships by mastering your reactions, how to parent with emotional wisdom, how to navigate conflict without losing your center. And most importantly, you'll learn that emotional mastery isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming free. Free to feel everything without being controlled by anything. Free to respond instead of react. Free to choose peace even when the world offers chaos. This is not about perfection. You will still feel anger, fear, sadness, frustration. You're human. Emotions are part of being alive, but you'll feel them differently. You'll experience them without being possessed by them. You'll honor them without surrendering to them. You'll become someone who can stand in the storm and remain unshaken. Not because the storm doesn't affect you, but because you've built an inner foundation so strong that nothing external can topple it. This is emotional freedom. This is what it means to have an unshakable mind. And it begins now. With this moment. With the decision to stop being controlled by your emotions and start mastering them. The journey won't always be easy. There will be moments of discomfort, moments of doubt, moments where old patterns try to reclaim their territory. But every step forward is a victory. Every moment of awareness is progress. Every choice to pause instead of react is a transformation. And over time, these moments accumulate. These choices compound, and you become someone entirely new. Someone who radiates calm in chaos. Someone who responds with wisdom instead of impulse. Someone whose presence brings peace to every room they enter. This is who you're becoming. This is the path you're walking. This is the transformation that begins right here, right now. Welcome to the journey toward emotional mastery. Welcome to the path of the unshakable mind. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Understanding emotional reactivity. Emotional reactivity is the automatic pattern of thought and feeling that takes control before you do. It's the raised voice when someone criticizes you, the defensive comment when you feel attacked, the silent withdrawal when you're hurt, the spiral of overthinking that keeps you awake at night. It's the moment when emotion hijacks your rational mind and makes decisions for you. When you say something you regret. When you act in ways that contradict your values. When you wonder later, why did I do that? Most people live at the mercy of these reactions because they've never learned that emotions are signals, not orders. They experience anger and assume they must express it immediately. They feel fear and believe they must avoid what scares them. They sense sadness and think they must drown in it. But emotions are not commands. They're information, data from your nervous system about what's happening inside you and around you. And like all information, they can be observed, interpreted, and responded to with intention. Or they can be ignored, misunderstood, and reacted to unconsciously. The difference between these two approaches is the difference between emotional mastery and emotional chaos. To master emotions, you must first observe them without judgment. This is harder than it sounds, because for most of your life you've been taught to judge your emotions as good or bad, appropriate or inappropriate, acceptable or shameful. You've learned that anger is dangerous, that fear is weakness, that sadness is something to hide. So when these emotions arise, you either suppress them or explode with them. But neither suppression nor explosion is mastery. Both are forms of being controlled by emotion, one through avoidance, the other through surrender. True mastery begins with observation, with the ability to notice what you're feeling without immediately acting on it or pushing it away. To say, I notice anger rising in my body. I feel heat in my chest, tension in my jaw, a desire to lash out. And then to pause, to breathe, to create space. This pause, this brief moment between stimulus and response, is where freedom lives. It's where choice becomes possible. It's where you reclaim control, because in that pause you can ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What does it need? And how do I want to respond? Every reaction has a purpose. This is crucial to understand. Your emotions are not random. They're not flaws in your design. They're evolutionary adaptations that have helped humans survive for millions of years. Anger protects boundaries. It rises when you perceive a threat to your dignity, your safety, your sense of fairness. It mobilizes energy to defend what matters to you. Fear seeks safety. It alerts you to danger, helps you assess risk, prepares your body to respond quickly to threats. Sadness calls for healing. It signals loss, invites reflection, creates space for processing and recovery. Even emotions you might consider negative serve important functions. Guilt reminds you of your values. Shame, in healthy doses, helps you stay connected to your community. Anxiety keeps you prepared and alert. The problem isn't the emotion itself. The problem is when the emotion takes over completely, when it bypasses your conscious mind and drives your behavior without your consent. This is what we call emotional reactivity, and it happens because of how your brain is wired. Let's talk about your brain for a moment, because understanding the neuroscience of emotion is essential to mastering it. Your brain has different regions that process information in different ways. The most relevant for our purposes are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala is your brain's alarm system. It's ancient, fast, and designed for survival. When it detects a potential threat, whether physical danger or social rejection, it triggers an immediate emotional response. This happens in milliseconds. Before you're even consciously aware of what's happening, your amygdala has already activated your body's stress response. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Stress hormones flood your system. You're ready to fight, flee, or freeze. This is brilliant design when you're facing a predator or immediate physical danger. But in modern life, your amygdala can't distinguish between a tiger and a critical email from your boss. It reacts the same way. And that's where problems begin. The prefrontal cortex, on the other hand, is your brain's executive center. It's responsible for rational thought, planning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. This is the part of your brain that can assess situations calmly, consider consequences, and choose appropriate responses. It's slower than the amygdala, but far more sophisticated. When you're emotionally reactive, what's happening is this. Your amygdala has detected a threat and triggered a response before your prefrontal cortex can intervene. You're operating on autopilot. Your survival brain has taken the wheel, and by the time your rational mind catches up, you've already said or done something you regret. This is the root of emotional reactivity. It's not a character flaw. It's not a sign that you're broken or weak. It's simply how your brain is designed to keep you safe. But here's the good news. You can change this pattern. You can train your prefrontal cortex to intervene faster, to create that crucial pause between trigger and reaction. This is where the practice of emotional awareness comes in. Emotional awareness is the ability to recognize what you're feeling in real time, as it's happening, before it takes control. Most people only become aware of their emotions after they've already reacted. They realize they were angry only after they've yelled. They recognize their anxiety only after they've spiraled into worry. But emotional mastery requires earlier awareness, the ability to catch the emotion as it's rising, before it peaks, before it hijacks your behavior. This takes practice, lots of practice, because your habitual patterns are deeply ingrained. They've been reinforced thousands of times over the course of your life. But with consistent attention, you can develop what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thought processes and emotional states. You learn to notice the early warning signs of reactivity, the subtle shift in your breathing, the slight tension in your shoulders, the particular thought pattern that always precedes a reaction. These are your cues, your body's way of saying attention needed here. Emotion rising. Prepare to respond consciously. When you catch these cues early, you have time to intervene, time to pause, time to choose how you want to respond instead of being controlled by automatic patterns. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine someone criticizes your work in a meeting. Your immediate internal reaction might be defensiveness, maybe even anger. Without awareness, you might snap back immediately, defend yourself, dismiss their feedback, maybe even attack them in return. But with emotional awareness, the process looks different. You notice the criticism. You feel the heat rising in your chest. You recognize the familiar pattern of defensiveness starting to form. But instead of reacting immediately, you pause. You take a breath. You say to yourself, I'm feeling defensive right now. That's understandable. This criticism feels threatening to my competence. In that moment of awareness, you've created space. The emotion is there, but it doesn't control you. You're observing it, not drowning in it. From that space, you can choose your response. Maybe you take a moment before replying. Maybe you ask a clarifying question. Maybe you thank them for their feedback and say you'll consider it. The specific response doesn't matter as much as this. You chose it. You weren't controlled by your automatic defensive pattern. You responded from awareness, not reactivity. This is emotional mastery in action. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of choice. Now, let's talk about the most common patterns of emotional reactivity, because recognizing your particular patterns is the first step to changing them. Some people are externally reactive. When they feel strong emotion, they express it outward, through raised voices, aggressive gestures, blame, criticism. Others are internally reactive. They turn emotion inward, through self-criticism, rumination, withdrawal, silent suffering. Neither pattern is better or worse. Both are forms of being controlled by emotion rather than mastering it. External reactivity tends to damage relationships. When you consistently react with anger, defensiveness, or aggression, people around you learn to walk on eggshells. They feel unsafe. Trust erodes. Internal reactivity tends to damage yourself. When you consistently turn emotion inward, you carry accumulated stress, anxiety, and pain. Your mental health suffers. Depression and anxiety often follow. Most people have both patterns triggered by different situations or emotions. You might externalize anger but internalize sadness. You might react outwardly at home but shut down at work. Understanding your patterns is crucial, because you can't change what you don't see. You can't master reactivity until you know exactly how it shows up in your life. So take a moment to reflect. When you feel strong emotion, what do you typically do? Do you lash out? Withdraw, blame others? Blame yourself? Overthink, avoid, numb with distractions? There's no judgment here. This is just observation. Just data about how you've learned to handle emotional intensity. And here's what's important to understand. However you react now, you learned it somewhere. These patterns were adaptive ones. They helped you survive difficult circumstances, navigate challenging relationships, protect yourself from pain. Maybe you learned to shut down emotionally because expressing feelings was punished in your family. Maybe you learned to react with anger because it was the only emotion that made you feel powerful when you felt vulnerable. These patterns made sense when you developed them. They were your brain's best solution to the circumstances you faced. But just because they were adaptive then doesn't mean they serve you now. And just because they're habitual doesn't mean they're permanent. This is where the concept of neuroplasticity becomes revolutionary. Your brain can change. Your emotional patterns can be rewired. Your automatic reactions can be transformed into conscious responses. But first, you have to observe them. Understand them. See them clearly without shame or judgment, because shame keeps you stuck. When you judge yourself for being reactive, you add a second layer of suffering on top of the first. You feel angry, then feel ashamed of your anger. You feel anxious, then feel weak for being anxious. The second arrow suffering, as Buddhist psychology calls it, only deepens the pattern. It doesn't help you change. What helps is compassionate observation. The ability to say, I reacted in this way. That's interesting. I wonder what triggered that. I wonder what I was trying to protect. I wonder how I might respond differently next time. This curiosity, this gentle inquiry, opens the door to transformation. Because you can't force yourself to change, but you can observe, understand, and gradually shift your patterns through awareness and practice. Let's talk about triggers, because understanding what triggers your reactivity is essential to mastering it. A trigger is any stimulus, internal or external, that activates an emotional reaction. It could be a person's tone of voice, a particular situation, a memory, even a physical sensation. Triggers are deeply personal. What sets you off might not bother someone else at all. What leaves them overwhelmed might not affect you. This is because triggers are connected to your unique history, your unhealed wounds, your core beliefs about yourself and the world. If you grew up feeling criticized, you might be triggered by any hint of disapproval. If you experienced abandonment, you might be triggered by perceived rejection. If you learned that the world is dangerous, you might be triggered by uncertainty or change. Your triggers reveal what needs healing. They point to the places where you're still carrying pain, where you're still protecting old wounds, and this is actually valuable information, because once you identify your triggers, you can prepare for them. You can develop strategies for handling them skillfully. You can't always control what triggers you, but you can absolutely control how you respond to being triggered. This requires preparation, because in the heat of the moment, when your amygdala has already activated, it's nearly impossible to think clearly and respond consciously. But if you've identified your triggers beforehand, if you've practiced your response, if you've developed skills for regulating your nervous system, you have a much better chance of maintaining control. Think of it like training for a sport. Athletes don't wait until game time to figure out their strategy. They prepare, they practice, they develop automatic responses for high-pressure situations. Emotional mastery requires the same approach. You prepare before you're triggered. You practice when you're calm. You develop skills and strategies so that when intensity arises, you have tools ready. We'll explore specific techniques throughout this audiobook, but the foundation is always the same. Awareness first, then response. You can't master what you don't notice. You can't change patterns you can't see. You can't respond consciously if you don't create space between trigger and reaction. So if you take nothing else from this chapter, take this. Emotional reactivity is not your enemy. It's simply an unconscious pattern that needs your conscious attention. Every time you react without awareness, you strengthen that pattern. Every time you pause and observe, you weaken it. Every moment of awareness is a victory. Every conscious response is progress. Every time you create space between stimulus and reaction, you're rewiring your brain toward emotional mastery. This is not about perfection. You will still react sometimes. You will still lose your temper, feel overwhelmed, say things you regret. But over time, with practice and patience, those moments will become less frequent. The intensity will decrease. The recovery will be faster. And gradually, you'll notice something profound. You're no longer at the mercy of your emotions. You're no longer controlled by automatic reactions. You're present. You're aware. You're choosing your responses. You're becoming emotionally unshakable. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the transformation that begins with understanding emotional reactivity. And now that you understand it, now that you see how it works, you're ready to go deeper, to learn the neuroscience of emotional regulation, to discover how to actually train your brain toward calm and control. That's where we're going next. But for now, simply notice. Observe your patterns. Watch your reactions without judgment, because the journey to emotional mastery begins with awareness. And awareness begins now. Let's deepen this understanding by exploring how emotional reactivity shows up in everyday life. Because theory is helpful, but recognition is transformative. Consider your morning routine. Perhaps you wake up and immediately check your phone. Within minutes, you've exposed yourself to dozens of potential triggers. News that disturbs you, messages that stress you, social media that makes you compare yourself to others. Your nervous system, barely awake, is already activated. Your amygdala is already scanning for threats, and you haven't even gotten out of bed. This is how emotional reactivity accumulates, not through one big event, but through countless small moments of activation that compound throughout the day. By the time you arrive at work, you're already carrying tension. When a coworker makes an offhand comment, you snap. Not because the comment was particularly offensive, but because you've been accumulating activation since the moment you woke up. This is what psychologists call stress stacking, where, when unprocessed, emotional activation builds upon itself until a minor trigger creates a major reaction. The key to interrupting this pattern is recognizing it early, before the stack becomes too high. Before the small triggers become overwhelming. This requires developing what we might call emotional hygiene, or regular practices that help you process and release emotional activation rather than accumulating it. Just as you brush your teeth to prevent decay, you need daily practices to prevent emotional buildup. We'll explore specific techniques in later chapters, but the principle is simple. Emotions need to move through you, not get stuck in you. When you suppress emotion, it doesn't disappear. It gets stored in your body, in your nervous system, creating chronic tension and making you more reactive over time. When you express emotion unconsciously, you may release some tension, but you also strengthen reactive patterns and damage relationships. The middle path, the path of emotional mastery, is to experience emotion fully while maintaining awareness and choice, to feel what you feel without being controlled by it. This sounds paradoxical at first. How can you fully feel something and not be controlled by it? Isn't being consumed by emotion part of feeling it fully? No. And this distinction is crucial. There's a difference between experiencing emotion and identifying with it, between feeling anger and becoming anger, between noticing fear and being overtaken by fear. When you experience emotion with awareness, you create what's called psychological distance, or decentering. You're not in the emotion. You're with it. You're observing it, feeling it, but not drowning in it. This is what mindfulness practitioners mean when they talk about being present with experience. You're fully here, fully feeling, but also maintaining perspective, holding space for the emotion without collapsing into it. Think of it like watching waves from the beach. The waves are real, powerful, sometimes intense, but you're not in the ocean being tossed around. You're on the shore, observing, present, but stable. This is the stance of emotional mastery. You feel everything. You suppress nothing, but you remain grounded, aware, capable of responding skillfully. Now let's talk about emotional contagion, because this is one of the most overlooked aspects of emotional reactivity. Emotions are contagious. Neuroscience has discovered mirror neurons in our brains that automatically mimic the emotional states of people around us. When someone is anxious, you tend to feel anxious. When someone is angry, you feel tension. When someone is calm, you tend to relax. This happens unconsciously, automatically. Your nervous system is constantly syncing with the nervous systems around you. This is beautiful in many ways. It's how empathy works, how connection happens, how we understand each other without words. But it also means you can catch other people's emotional states like catching a cold. You can absorb stress, anxiety, anger from those around you without even realizing it. This is especially true in close relationships. You come home after work, ready to relax, and within minutes of being around your stressed partner, you're stressed too. Not because anything happened to you, but because emotional states transfer. Understanding this changes how you approach relationships and environments. It makes you more aware of whose energy you're absorbing and why. It doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected, but it does mean you develop stronger emotional boundaries. You learn to distinguish between your feelings and feelings you've absorbed from others. You learn to say, "This anxiety I'm feeling, is it mine? Or have I picked it up from someone else?" And that simple question can break the automatic pattern of emotional contagion. Emotional boundaries are like a semi-permeable membrane. They let empathy and connection through, but they filter out the toxicity and chaos that isn't yours to carry. This is particularly important for highly sensitive people, empaths, and anyone who works in emotionally intense environments. Without boundaries, you become an emotional sponge, absorbing everything, overwhelmed by feelings that aren't even yours. With boundaries, you can remain open and connected while also protecting your inner peace. You can care deeply without being destroyed by what you care about. Let's also address the role of shame in emotional reactivity. Because shame is often the hidden driver of our most intense reactions. Shame is the feeling of being fundamentally flawed, unworthy, or bad. It's different from guilt, which says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad. When shame is triggered, people react in predictable ways. Some attack, blaming others, deflecting, getting angry to avoid feeling the pain of shame. Others withdraw, hiding, isolating, going silent to avoid exposure. Both reactions are attempts to protect yourself from the unbearable feeling of shame. And both make the problem worse, because shame thrives in secrecy and silence. The more you hide it, the stronger it gets. The more you react to avoid it, the more power it has over you. Emotional mastery requires bringing shame into the light, not by oversharing or seeking validation, but by acknowledging it internally with compassion. By learning to say, "I'm feeling shame right now. I notice the urge to defend myself or hide. But this shame is just an old wound being activated. It doesn't mean I'm actually flawed or unworthy. It's just a feeling, and I can hold space for it without reacting." This kind of internal dialogue transforms shame. It removes its power. It allows you to respond to situations based on reality, rather than based on avoiding the pain of feeling inadequate. Understanding the layers beneath emotional reactivity, the stress stacking, the emotional contagion, the shame dynamics, gives you more leverage for change. Because surface-level awareness helps, but deep understanding transforms. When you see not just that you're reactive, but why and how your reactivity operates, you can intervene with precision. You develop what might be called emotional literacy, the ability to read your internal landscape with accuracy and respond with skill. This literacy isn't academic. It's practical. It's the difference between drowning in emotion and navigating it, between being tossed by every wave and learning to surf, and like any literacy, it improves with practice. The more you observe, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more you can intervene. The more you intervene, the more mastery you develop. This is not quick. This is not easy. But it is possible. Absolutely, completely possible. Every person who has achieved emotional mastery started exactly where you are now. They began with reactivity, with patterns they didn't choose, with automatic responses that caused suffering, but they committed to awareness. They practiced observation. They learned to pause, and gradually, steadily, they transformed. You can do the same. Not because you're special, but because this is how the human brain works. This is what neuroplasticity makes possible. Your past patterns do not determine your future responses. Your history of reactivity does not define your capacity for mastery. Every moment is a new beginning. Every breath is an opportunity to choose awareness over automaticity, and right now, in this moment, you have that choice. You can continue as you have been, or you can begin the transformation. You can stay at the mercy of your emotions, or you can learn to master them. Not by force, not by suppression, but through understanding, awareness, and practice. This is the path. This is the invitation. This is what becomes possible when you truly understand emotional reactivity. And now that you understand it, truly understand it, you're ready for the next step. Ready to learn how to regulate emotions through neuroscience and practice. Ready to discover the specific techniques that rewire your brain toward calm. That's where we go next. But take this with you. Emotional reactivity is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And with that responsibility comes immense power. The power to transform your inner world. The power to change how you show up in relationships. The power to become emotionally unshakable. This journey begins with understanding, and that understanding deepens with every moment of awareness you bring to your emotional experience. You're not broken. You're not flawed. You're simply learning a skill you were never taught, and now you're learning it. Welcome to Emotional Mastery. Welcome to the path of the unshakable mind. Chapter 2. The Science of Emotional Regulation. Emotional control isn't about cold detachment. It's about creating space between stimulus and response. This space is where freedom lives, where choice becomes possible, where you reclaim your power. But creating that space isn't just a matter of willpower or positive thinking. It's a neurological process, one that can be trained, strengthened, and mastered through understanding and practice. Modern neuroscience shows that the prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, can override emotional impulses from the amygdala, but only with awareness and training. Let's understand exactly how this works, because when you understand the mechanics of emotional regulation at a neural level, you gain tremendous power to transform your responses. Your brain operates through networks of neurons. When you have an experience repeatedly, the neurons involved in that experience form stronger connections. This is called neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you react with anger, you strengthen the neural pathways of anger. Every time you respond to stress with anxiety, you deepen those anxiety circuits. But here's the revolutionary part. Every time you pause before reacting, you're creating new pathways. Every time you choose awareness over automaticity, you're building circuits of emotional control. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain literally reshaping itself toward calm and clarity. Think of it like creating a path through a forest. The first time you walk a new route, you have to push through brush, step over logs, navigate obstacles. It's difficult. It requires effort. But if you walk that same route every day, eventually a clear path forms. The brush is worn down. The obstacles are cleared. Walking that route becomes easy, automatic. Your neural pathways work the same way. The routes you travel most frequently become the easiest to access, and the routes you stop traveling eventually fade. This means your current emotional patterns, however ingrained they feel, are not permanent. They're just well-worn paths, and you can create new ones, but it requires repetition, consistency, patient practice. You can't think your way into new patterns. You have to practice your way into them. You have to actually engage the new circuits repeatedly until they become stronger than the old ones. This is why understanding alone isn't enough. Why reading books or listening to audiobooks, while valuable, doesn't automatically create change. Change happens through practice, through repeatedly choosing the new response even when the old one feels more natural, through showing up day after day to train your brain like you'd train your body. So what does this training look like? What are the specific practices that rewire your brain toward emotional regulation? The foundation is mindfulness, the practice of present moment awareness without judgment. Mindfulness might sound abstract or spiritual, but it's actually deeply practical and scientifically validated. Thousands of studies have shown that regular mindfulness practice literally changes the structure and function of the brain. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex, improving executive function and emotional control. It reduces activity in the amygdala, decreasing reactivity and anxiety. It thickens the insula, enhancing interoception, your ability to sense what's happening in your body. All of these changes support emotional regulation. They give you more conscious control over your responses. They help you notice emotions earlier, before they take over. They create that crucial space between trigger and reaction. The basic practice of mindfulness is simple. You bring your attention to present moment experience. This could be your breath, your body sensations, sounds, or simply whatever is arising in your awareness. When your mind wanders, and it will constantly, you notice that it wandered and gently bring it back. Without judgment, without frustration, just noticing and returning. This simple act of noticing and returning is the exercise that strengthens your attention and your ability to interrupt automatic patterns. Think of it like doing bicep curls for your awareness. Every time you notice your mind has wandered and bring it back, you're doing one rep. And just like physical exercise, these reps accumulate. They build strength over time. At first, you might only be able to stay present for seconds before your mind wanders. That's completely normal. Your mind has been wandering unconsciously for years. Training it to stay present takes time. But with daily practice, even just 10 minutes a day, you'll notice changes. Your mind will wander less frequently. You'll catch it wandering sooner. You'll develop stronger attention and greater awareness. And this awareness directly translates to emotional regulation. Because when you can catch your thoughts wandering, you can also catch your emotions rising. Before they peak, before they take control. Let's talk about the breath. Because conscious breathing is one of the most powerful tools for emotional regulation. Your breath is unique among bodily functions. It operates automatically, but you can also control it consciously. This makes it a bridge between your unconscious processes and your conscious awareness. When you're stressed or reactive, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. This signals danger to your nervous system, activating the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response. But when you consciously slow and deepen your breath, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest response. You signal safety to your body. You calm your nervous system. This isn't just relaxation. It's a neurological shift. You're actually changing your biochemistry through breath. Deep, slow breathing increases vagal tone, the activity of your vagus nerve, which regulates stress response. It reduces cortisol, your primary stress hormone. It increases coherence between your heart and brain. All of these changes make emotional regulation easier. They give your prefrontal cortex more resources to work with. They reduce the intensity of amygdala activation. Here's a simple but powerful breathing technique. The 4-7-8 breath. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 7. Breathe out through your mouth for a count of 8. Repeat this 4 times. That's it. 2 minutes maximum. But in those 2 minutes, you're actively regulating your nervous system. You're creating physiological calm. You're building the neural pathways of emotional control. The key is to use this technique regularly, not just when you're overwhelmed, but as daily practice. Because the benefits accumulate. Each practice session strengthens your capacity to regulate emotion in the moment. It's like building a muscle. You don't wait until you need to lift something heavy to start exercising. You build strength beforehand so that when the moment comes, you're ready. Similarly, you build emotional regulation capacity through daily practice so that when intense emotions arise, you have the neural infrastructure to handle them. Now let's talk about cognitive reappraisal, the practice of reinterpreting situations to change your emotional response. This isn't positive thinking or denying reality. It's recognizing that most situations are ambiguous, and your interpretation determines your emotional response. Someone doesn't respond to your text. You could interpret this as rejection, which triggers anxiety or sadness, or you could interpret it as they're busy, which generates no emotional activation. Neither interpretation is necessarily true. You don't have enough information. But one interpretation creates suffering, the other doesn't. Cognitive reappraisal is the practice of consciously choosing interpretations that serve your well-being without distorting reality. This doesn't mean becoming naive or ignoring red flags. It means recognizing where you're adding suffering through catastrophic or negative interpretations and choosing more neutral or constructive frames instead. Research shows that people who regularly practice cognitive reappraisal have better emotional regulation, lower anxiety, and stronger relationships, because they're not constantly reacting to worst-case interpretations of ambiguous situations. Here's how to practice it. When you notice strong emotion arising, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Is there another way to interpret this that's equally valid but less distressing? This simple question interrupts automatic interpretations and opens space for choice. You might not immediately find a better interpretation, but the act of questioning loosens the grip of the automatic one. Over time, this becomes a habit. Your brain starts generating multiple interpretations automatically, rather than latching onto the first, often most negative one. This is neuroplasticity in action again. You're training your brain to be more flexible, less reactive, more skillful in how it interprets experience. Let's explore the role of body awareness. Because emotional regulation isn't just about your mind, it's about your entire nervous system. Emotions are embodied experiences. They're not just thoughts or feelings in your head, they're physical sensations in your body. Anxiety is tightness in your chest. Anger is heat and tension. Sadness is heaviness. Joy is lightness and expansion. When you're disconnected from body awareness, you miss the early signals of emotional activation. By the time you consciously notice you're angry, you're already fully activated and much harder to regulate. But when you develop interoception, the ability to sense internal body states, you catch emotions much earlier. You notice the first subtle shift in your chest, the slight tension in your jaw, the change in your breathing. At this early stage, regulation is much easier. It's like catching a small fire before it becomes a blaze. A few deep breaths, a brief pause, and you can prevent full activation. Developing body awareness requires practice. Most people spend their lives so focused externally or lost in thought that they barely inhabit their bodies. But you can train this capacity through body scan meditations, where you systematically bring attention to different parts of your body, through yoga or other mindful movement practices, through simply pausing throughout the day to check in. What am I feeling in my body right now? This isn't about judgment or trying to change anything. Just noticing, developing familiarity with your internal landscape. Over time, you'll recognize your personal patterns. You'll know that tension in your shoulders means you're stressed, that butterflies in your stomach mean you're anxious, that warmth in your chest means you're connecting with someone. This recognition gives you information, data you can use to regulate before you're overwhelmed. Now let's address something crucial. The window of tolerance. This is a concept from trauma therapy that's relevant for everyone. Your window of tolerance is the range of emotional activation you can experience while still maintaining regulation. When you're within your window, you can feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You can think clearly, make decisions, respond skillfully. But when you're pushed outside your window, either into hyperarousal, too activated, or hypoarousal, too shut down, you lose access to regulation. You're either overwhelmed or numb, reactive, or frozen. Everyone's window is different, and it changes based on stress, sleep, health, life circumstances. When you're well rested and calm, your window is wider. When you're exhausted or already stressed, it's narrower. Understanding your window helps you recognize when you're approaching your limits, when you need to take action to regulate before you're pushed outside your capacity. It also helps you have compassion for yourself when you do become overwhelmed. You're not weak or broken. You're simply outside your window of tolerance in that moment. The goal of emotional regulation practice is to gradually widen your window, to increase your capacity to experience emotional intensity without losing control. This happens through repeated exposure to challenging emotions while using regulation skills. Each time you successfully regulate through discomfort, your window expands slightly. It's like progressive training in any skill. You don't start with the hardest level. You start where you can succeed, then gradually increase difficulty. Similarly, you practice emotional regulation first in calm moments, then in mildly challenging situations, gradually building capacity for more intense experiences. Let's talk about self-compassion, because it's essential for sustainable emotional regulation. Many people approach emotion regulation with a harsh, critical attitude. They judge themselves for having emotions, for being reactive, for not being perfectly calm. This self-criticism activates stress response. It actually makes regulation harder. You're trying to regulate emotion while simultaneously creating more emotional activation through self-judgment. Self-compassion is the antidote. It's treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend, recognizing that everyone struggles, that making mistakes is part of being human. Research by Kristen Neff and others has shown that self-compassion is more effective than self-criticism for motivation and change. It reduces anxiety and depression. It increases resilience and emotional well-being. When you're compassionate with yourself, you create safety. And in safety, your nervous system can relax. Your prefrontal cortex can come online. Regulation becomes possible. Self-compassion in practice sounds like, "This is hard right now. I'm struggling, and that's okay. Everyone struggles sometimes. Let me be kind to myself in this moment." It's simple but profound. It interrupts the cycle of self-judgment that often intensifies emotional reactivity. Now, let's integrate everything we've explored into a practical framework for emotional regulation. When you notice emotional activation, whether through body sensations, thoughts, or the urge to react, follow these steps. First, pause. Create even a brief gap between the trigger and your response. Take a breath. This activates your prefrontal cortex and gives you access to choice. Second, name what you're feeling. "I'm feeling anxious," or "this is anger." Labeling emotion reduces its intensity, a phenomenon neuroscientists call affect labeling. It shifts brain activity from emotional centers to language centers. Third, locate the emotion in your body. Where do you feel it? What are the physical sensations? This grounds you in present moment awareness rather than getting lost in thoughts about the emotion. Fourth, breathe. Use conscious breathing to regulate your nervous system. Even a few slow, deep breaths make a difference. Fifth, question your interpretation. What story are you telling yourself? Is there another way to see this situation? Sixth, respond with intention. What action aligns with your values? How do you want to show up in this moment? This might sound like a lot to remember in an emotionally charged moment, and initially it is. You'll forget. You'll react before you remember to pause. That's normal. But with practice, these steps become automatic. They collapse into a seamless process that happens in seconds. Pause, name, locate, breathe, reframe, respond becomes one fluid motion. This is mastery. Not perfection, but skillfulness. The ability to navigate emotional intensity with awareness and choice. And it builds over time. Each practice session, each moment of conscious regulation, each time you catch yourself and choose differently, all of it compounds. You're literally rewiring your brain, creating new neural pathways, strengthening your prefrontal cortex, building emotional resilience. This isn't theory. This isn't wishful thinking. This is neuroscience. This is what happens when you consistently practice emotional regulation. Your brain changes. Your nervous system recalibrates. Your automatic responses shift. What once felt impossible becomes natural. But it requires commitment, daily practice, patient repetition, trust in the process even before you see dramatic results. Because the results will come, not overnight but steadily. You'll notice you're slightly less reactive, slightly quicker to catch yourself, slightly more able to stay calm under pressure. These small improvements compound. Over weeks and months, they transform your emotional life. You become someone who can handle intensity, who stays grounded in chaos, who responds with wisdom rather than reacting with impulse. This is the science of emotional regulation. Not abstract theory, but practical neuroscience you can apply every single day. Your brain is plastic. Your patterns are changeable. Your emotional future is not determined by your emotional past. You train your brain through repetition, mindfulness, and conscious breathing. Each time you pause before reacting, you're strengthening the neural pathways of control and weakening the circuits of impulsivity. This is your power. This is your path. This is what becomes possible when you understand the science and commit to the practice. You're not trying to eliminate emotion. You're learning to work with it skillfully, to experience fully while remaining in control, to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. This is emotional regulation. This is neuroplasticity in service of well-being. This is how you build an unshakable mind. And now that you understand the science, now that you have the framework, you're ready to apply this to the most challenging arena, relationships. Because theory practiced in isolation is one thing, but relationships, with their triggers, their complexity, their intensity, that's where emotional regulation is truly tested. That's where we're going next. Into the heart of human connection, where mastery becomes most necessary and most transformative. But before we move forward, let's deepen your understanding of how practice actually creates change. Because many people practice inconsistently or with unclear expectations, then wonder why they're not seeing results. Neuroplasticity requires specific conditions to occur. It's not automatic just because you're trying something new. Understanding these conditions helps you practice more effectively. First, attention is essential. Your brain changes based on what you pay attention to. If you're practicing mindfulness while simultaneously planning your day, checking your thoughts, or judging your performance, you're not actually strengthening mindfulness circuits. You're strengthening distraction circuits. Quality of attention matters more than duration. 5 minutes of focused, present awareness creates more change than 30 minutes of half-hearted practice where your mind is elsewhere. This means when you practice, really practice, bring full attention to the experience. Notice when attention wanders and bring it back. Make the practice itself the practice, not something you do while thinking about something else. Second, repetition is non-negotiable. Your brain needs repeated experiences to strengthen neural pathways. Practicing once a week won't create significant change. Daily practice, even brief sessions, is far more effective. Think of learning a language. Studying for hours once a week is less effective than practicing 15 minutes every day. The daily repetition creates stronger, more accessible neural pathways. Emotional regulation follows the same principle. Brief daily practice builds capacity more effectively than intensive occasional practice. This is actually good news. You don't need hours. You need consistency. 10 minutes daily of focused practice will transform your brain more than sporadic longer sessions. Third, challenge matters. Your brain adapts to challenge. If practice is always easy, you're not creating sufficient stimulus for change. You need to work at the edge of your capacity. Not so far beyond it that you're overwhelmed, but not so far within it that you're coasting. This means as you develop skill, you need to gradually increase difficulty. If sitting quietly for 10 minutes becomes easy, extend the time or practice in more distracting environments. If regulating mild emotions becomes manageable, practice with slightly more intense situations. This progressive challenge is what creates growth. It's how you widen your window of tolerance. It's how capacity expands. Fourth, rest and integration are crucial. Your brain consolidates learning during rest, particularly during sleep. This is why sleep quality significantly impacts emotional regulation capacity. When you're sleep deprived, your prefrontal cortex function decreases. Your amygdala becomes more reactive. Your ability to regulate plummets. Protecting sleep isn't just about rest. It's about giving your brain the conditions it needs to integrate practice and strengthen new neural pathways. Similarly, taking breaks during practice helps consolidation. Don't practice to exhaustion. Practice with focused intensity, then rest. This rhythm of effort and recovery optimizes learning. Now let's address a common obstacle, the expectation of linear progress. People often expect improvement to be steady and consistent. They practice for a week or two, notice some benefits, then hit a plateau or even experience a regression, and conclude the practice isn't working. But skill development is never linear. It happens in waves. You improve, plateau, sometimes temporarily decline, then suddenly jump to a new level. This is normal. This is how learning works. The plateaus aren't signs of failure. They're periods of consolidation where your brain is integrating what you've learned before the next growth spurt. Understanding this prevents premature abandonment. Many people quit during a plateau, right before they would have experienced a breakthrough. Stay with the practice through the plateaus. Trust the process. Your brain is working even when you can't see obvious progress. Let's also explore the role of expectation in emotional regulation. Because what you expect significantly influences what you experience. If you approach practice thinking, "This will never work for me," or "I'm too reactive to change," you're creating neural patterns that confirm those beliefs. Your expectation primes your brain to look for evidence that supports it. But if you approach with curious openness, "I wonder what might shift with practice," you create different neural conditions. You're more likely to notice small improvements, which reinforces continued practice. This isn't about forced optimism or denying difficulty. It's about recognizing that your attitude toward practice influences the practice itself. Approach with gentle expectation of gradual change, not dramatic transformation overnight, but steady improvement over time. This balanced expectation supports consistent practice without creating frustration when progress is subtle. Let's talk about measurement, because tracking progress helps maintain motivation and recognizes improvements you might otherwise miss. Emotional regulation progress can be subtle. You don't suddenly become a different person. You gradually notice you're slightly less reactive, slightly quicker to catch yourself, slightly more able to stay present under pressure. These small shifts are easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but they're the evidence that your practice is working, that your brain is changing. Consider keeping a simple daily log. Rate your emotional regulation on a scale of 1 to 10. Note situations that challenged you and how you handled them. Track how many times you remembered to pause before reacting. Over weeks, patterns emerge. You'll see that situations that once overwhelmed you now trigger less intense reactions, that you catch yourself sooner. That regulation feels slightly more accessible. This data provides evidence of progress and motivates continued practice, because you're not relying on vague feelings about whether you're improving. You have concrete information. Now, let's address integration, bringing emotional regulation from formal practice into daily life. It's one thing to stay calm during meditation. It's another to stay regulated when your child is having a meltdown, your partner is criticizing you, or your boss is making unreasonable demands. The gap between formal practice and real-world application is where many people struggle. They can regulate in ideal conditions but lose all capacity in challenging situations. This is why informal practice is just as important as formal practice. Informal practice means bringing regulation techniques into everyday moments. Waiting in line, practice breath awareness. Driving in traffic, notice body tension and consciously relax. Having a difficult conversation, pause before responding. These micro-practices throughout the day bridge formal practice and real-world application. They train your brain to access regulation skills in the moments that matter most. Think of it like learning a sport. You don't just train in the gym. You practice the skills in game-like conditions. You simulate the pressure, the unpredictability, the intensity. Similarly, informal practice in daily life prepares you for emotional intensity in real situations. It makes regulation accessible when you actually need it, not just when conditions are perfect. Let's also explore the social dimension of emotional regulation. Because you don't regulate in isolation, you regulate within relationships and social contexts. Other people's emotional states influence yours. Environments affect your nervous system. Cultural expectations shape what emotions you allow yourself to feel. Understanding these social influences helps you navigate them skillfully. You learn which relationships support your regulation and which challenge it, which environments calm your nervous system and which activate it. This doesn't mean avoiding all challenge or only spending time with peaceful people. But it does mean being strategic, knowing when you have the capacity to handle intensity and when you need to protect your regulation. It means recognizing that spending time with someone highly anxious or reactive will test your regulation, not because they're bad people, but because emotional contagion is real. With this awareness, you can prepare. You can practice beforehand. You can set boundaries. You can limit exposure when your own capacity is low. This is emotional intelligence applied to relationships, not controlling others, but managing your own exposure and response skillfully. Finally, let's talk about self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to regulate emotion effectively. Self-efficacy is one of the strongest predictors of successful behavior change. When you believe you can do something, you're more likely to persist through difficulty, to practice consistently, to succeed. But self-efficacy isn't built through affirmations or positive thinking alone. It's built through experience, through small successes that prove to yourself that you're capable. This is why starting with manageable challenges matters. If you immediately try to regulate in your most triggering situations, you'll likely fail, which damages self-efficacy. But if you start with situations where regulation is possible, each success builds confidence. You prove to yourself that you can do this, that you're developing real capacity. These small wins accumulate. They create a foundation of self-trust. And from that foundation, you can approach increasingly challenging situations with confidence. Every moment of successful regulation is evidence. Evidence that you're changing, that you're developing mastery, that you're becoming someone who can handle emotional intensity. Collect this evidence. Remember it. Let it fuel your continued practice and reinforce your growing capacity. The science of emotional regulation is clear. Your brain can change. Your patterns can shift. Your capacity can expand. But science provides the map, not the territory. You must walk the path. It changes the entire dynamic of relationships. When you consistently remain regulated, others often begin to match your energy rather than you matching theirs. Your calm becomes contagious. Your groundedness becomes the baseline. But this requires incredible self-discipline, because every instinct wants you to defend yourself, to match their volume, to prove your point. You must choose calm over being right, peace over winning the argument, long-term relationship health over short-term emotional discharge. This is mastery. This is strength. This is what it means to be emotionally unshakable in relationships. Now let's explore the concept of emotional bids and how responding to them shapes relationship. Quality relationship researcher John Gottman discovered that relationships are built or destroyed through small moments he calls bids for connection. A bid is any attempt to connect, sharing a thought, asking a question, requesting attention, expressing a need. These happen constantly in relationships, often in subtle ways. Your partner mentions something interesting they saw. Your child shows you a drawing. Your friend texts about their day. These are all bids. You can respond in 3 ways: turning toward, engaging with interest, turning away, ignoring or missing the bid, or turning against, responding with irritation or criticism. How you respond to bids determines relationship quality more than any grand gesture or big conversation. Turning toward consistently builds connection, trust, and goodwill. Turning away or against erodes the relationship gradually until there's nothing left. But here's where emotional regulation becomes crucial. You can't turn toward when you're dysregulated. When you're stressed, overwhelmed, or activated, you miss bids or respond poorly. Your partner tries to connect and you snap at them. Your child needs attention and you dismiss them. Your friend reaches out and you ignore the message. Not because you don't care, but because you don't have capacity in that moment. You're outside your window of tolerance, operating in survival mode. This is why emotional regulation isn't selfish self-care. It's relationship care. When you maintain regulation, you have capacity to respond to bids, to be present, to connect. When you're chronically dysregulated, you damage relationships even when you love the people in them. So protecting your regulation is protecting your relationships. Taking time to breathe, to practice, to maintain your window of tolerance isn't taking away from relationships. It's investing in them. Let's talk about rupture and repair, because all relationships experience disconnection. You will have moments when you're triggered and respond poorly, when you're dysregulated and say something harsh, when you miss important bids because you're overwhelmed. These ruptures are inevitable. Perfection isn't possible. You're human. Relationships are complex and triggers will happen. But ruptures don't destroy relationships. Lack of repair does. Repair is the process of acknowledging the rupture, taking responsibility and reconnecting. It's saying, I was harsh earlier. I was triggered and responded poorly. I'm sorry, that wasn't about you. It was about my own reactivity. This simple act of repair restores connection. It models emotional responsibility. It teaches others that mistakes can be acknowledged and relationships can handle imperfection. Children especially need to see repair. Not parents who never mess up, but parents who mess up and take responsibility. This teaches them that relationships are resilient, that mistakes are normal, that repair is always possible. But repair requires regulation. You can't repair effectively while you're still activated. You need to calm your nervous system first, then approach repair from a grounded place. This is why the pause is so essential. When you've had a rupture, resist the urge to immediately fix it while emotions are still high. Take time to regulate first, then repair from a calm, clear place. Effective repair includes acknowledging what happened, taking responsibility without excuses, expressing understanding of impact, and committing to different behavior going forward. I raised my voice and that wasn't okay. I understand that made you feel unsafe. I'm working on catching myself sooner when I'm triggered. Next time I'll take a break before things escalate. This kind of repair strengthens relationships. It builds trust. It shows that you're committed to growth and to treating others with respect even when it's difficult. Now let's address a challenging truth. Some relationships require distance or boundaries, not more emotional work. Not every relationship can or should be saved through better regulation. Some relationships are toxic, abusive, or simply incompatible. Emotional mastery includes the wisdom to recognize which relationships deserve your energy and which ones require boundaries or distance. If someone is consistently abusive, manipulative, or dismissive of your needs, no amount of emotional regulation on your part will fix the relationship. The problem isn't your reactivity, it's their behavior. In these cases, boundaries are essential. Sometimes significant boundaries, including limiting contact or ending the relationship entirely. This isn't failure. This isn't giving up. This is emotional wisdom. Knowing that your well-being matters, that you deserve respect. That staying regulated sometimes means removing yourself from dysregulating relationships. Setting boundaries can feel incredibly difficult, especially with family or long-term relationships. Guilt, obligation, and fear of conflict make boundaries feel impossible. But boundaries are an act of self-respect and, paradoxically, relationship respect. You're saying, I value both of us too much to continue in a dynamic that brings out our worst. Clear boundaries might sound like, I'm happy to spend time together, but if shouting starts, I'll leave. I want to have a relationship with you, but not one that involves verbal attacks. Or, I'm not available to discuss this topic. I'm happy to talk about other things, but this subject isn't up for debate in our relationship. These boundaries protect your regulation. They make relationship possible without constant activation. They create space for connection without chaos. And interestingly, boundaries often improve relationships. When others know your limits, they often respect them. When you're clear about what you will and won't accept, others adjust their behavior. Not always. Some people resist boundaries and escalate when you set them. This tells you important information about the relationship and whether it's sustainable. But in many cases, clear, consistent boundaries create healthier dynamics. People know where they stand. Expectations are clear. Resentment decreases because you're not tolerating what you can't actually accept. Let's talk about the practice of loving detachment, because this is one of the highest forms of relational emotional mastery. Loving detachment means caring deeply about someone while remaining emotionally separate from their chaos, their choices, their emotional state. You love them, but you don't carry their pain as if it's yours. You support them, but you don't take responsibility for fixing their problems. You're present, but not enmeshed. This is especially important in relationships with people who struggle with addiction, mental illness, chronic trauma, or perpetual crisis. You can love someone and still let them experience the consequences of their choices. You can care about someone and still refuse to be pulled into their chaos. You can support someone and still maintain your own peace. Loving detachment doesn't mean being cold. It means having a clear sense of where you end and they begin. What's your responsibility and what's theirs? What you can control and what you can't. It's saying, I love you and I cannot fix this for you. I'm here to support you making healthy choices, but I won't participate in destructive patterns. This requires tremendous emotional strength, because every instinct wants you to rescue, to fix, to take away their pain. But often, the most loving thing you can do is allow people to face their own consequences, to learn their own lessons, to develop their own strength. Your regulation makes this possible. When you're grounded in your own center, you can hold space for others without losing yourself in their experience. When you master your reactions, you change the entire emotional tone of your relationships. This is the paradox of relational emotional mastery. By focusing on yourself, on your own regulation, on your own responses, you transform your relationships, not by trying to change others, not by managing their emotions, but by becoming someone who doesn't add reactivity to relational challenges. You become a stabilizing presence, someone safe, someone who can be counted on to stay grounded even when others are spinning. And that presence is magnetic. It draws people toward health. It invites better communication. It creates space for genuine connection. This is your power in relationships, not controlling others but mastering yourself, not fixing their dysregulation but maintaining your own regulation. And from that foundation of inner stability, relationships transform, not overnight but steadily. As you consistently show up regulated, present, and boundaried, you're not responsible for other people's emotional healing, but you are responsible for not adding to their emotional chaos. And when you take that responsibility seriously, when you commit to staying regulated no matter what others do, you become a force for peace in every relationship you touch. This is mastery. This is strength. This is what it means to be emotionally unshakable in the complex, challenging, beautiful arena of human relationships. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of trigger management. Because understanding the architecture of triggers gives you more precise tools for working with them. Every trigger has layers. On the surface, there's the immediate stimulus, and a comment, a behavior, a situation. But beneath that surface lies a complex web of associations, memories, and meanings. When someone raises their voice, you might react strongly not because of the volume itself, but because it reminds your nervous system of past experiences where raised voices preceded danger. When someone dismisses your opinion, you might feel intense anger not because of this specific dismissal, but because it activates a lifetime of feeling unheard and invalidated. The current situation is real, but your reaction intensity often comes from the accumulated weight of past experiences. This is why the same trigger can affect people so differently. One person barely notices criticism, while another person spirals for days. Not because one is stronger or weaker, but because their histories have created different neural associations. Understanding this helps you develop compassion for yourself and others. Your strong reactions make sense when you understand the layers beneath them, and others' reactions that seem disproportionate make sense when you recognize you don't know their full history. Now, here's where this gets practical. You can work with triggers at different layers. At the surface layer, you can use immediate regulation techniques, breathing, pausing, reframing. This manages the acute activation in the moment. At the middle layer, you can identify patterns and create response plans. You notice this type of situation always triggers you, so you prepare in advance. At the deep layer, you can work with the root wounds that make certain triggers so powerful. This might involve therapy, inner child work, or other healing practices that address the original pain. All three layers matter. Surface techniques help you cope in the moment. Middle layer strategies help you navigate predictable challenges. Deep work gradually reduces trigger sensitivity over time. Most people only work at the surface layer, trying to calm down when triggered. This helps, but it's like constantly mopping up water without fixing the leak. Working at all three layers creates comprehensive transformation. You handle immediate triggers better while also addressing their roots. Let's talk about projection, because this is one of the most common but least recognized relational triggers. Projection is when you attribute your own unacknowledged feelings, thoughts, or traits to someone else. You see in them what you can't face in yourself. If you're uncomfortable with your own anger, you might perceive others as angry when they're not. If you judge your own sensitivity, you might be triggered by others' emotional expression. The traits that most trigger you in others often point to something unresolved in yourself. Not always, but often enough that it's worth exploring. When you notice strong repeated reactions to someone's behavior, ask yourself, what is it about this behavior that bothers me so much? Is there any part of me that has this same trait that I judge or deny? This self-inquiry doesn't excuse others' poor behavior, but it does help you see where your reaction intensity might be amplified by projection. And when you recognize projection, you can own it. You can work with your own disowned parts rather than trying to change others. This is profoundly liberating, because trying to change others is exhausting and usually futile, but working with your own projections is fully within your control. Let's explore the concept of differentiation, which is essential for healthy relationships. Differentiation is your ability to remain yourself in relationship, to have your own thoughts, feelings, and values while staying connected to others. People with low differentiation become enmeshed. They adopt others' feelings as their own. They change their opinions based on who they're with. They need constant approval and validation. People with high differentiation can stay connected while remaining separate. They feel their own feelings without being overwhelmed by others' emotions. They maintain their values even when others disagree. They self-validate rather than depending on external approval. Emotional regulation and differentiation are intimately connected. When you can regulate your emotions, you can stay differentiated. When you're dysregulated, you lose yourself in relationship. Developing differentiation requires practice in staying centered when others are activated. Maintaining your own emotional state when someone is trying to pull you into theirs. This sounds like, I can see you're very upset and I care about that. But I'm not feeling upset about this situation. We can have different perspectives and both be okay. Or, I understand you think I should do this, but based on my own values and assessment, I'm choosing differently. I respect your opinion and I'm making my own choice. This isn't being stubborn or uncaring. It's being differentiated, having a clear sense of self that doesn't collapse under relational pressure. And paradoxically, high differentiation actually improves relationships. When you're not enmeshed, when you can remain yourself, connection becomes more authentic, less desperate, less suffocating. You relate from wholeness rather than from need, from choice rather than from dependence, and that creates space for genuine intimacy. Now let's talk about the practice of metacommunication, communicating about how you're communicating. When conversations become difficult or tensions rise, most people try to resolve the content. Who's right? What happened? What should be done? But often, the content isn't the real issue. The process is how you're talking to each other, the emotional tone, the unspoken dynamics. Metacommunication addresses the process. It pauses content discussion to name what's happening in the interaction itself. I notice we're both getting heated. Can we take a breath and try again? I'm feeling defensive right now, which means I'm probably not hearing you well. Can you say that again and I'll try to really listen? I think we're talking past each other. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying before I respond. This simple practice of naming the process interrupts destructive patterns. It brings awareness to what's happening beneath the words, and it models emotional intelligence. You're not blaming or defending, you're observing and adjusting. This requires regulation because you have to stay aware enough in the heat of the moment to notice the process, but it's incredibly powerful for preventing escalation. Let's address conflict specifically, because this is where relational emotional mastery is most tested. Conflict is inevitable in any meaningful relationship. Different needs, different perspectives, different values. These create friction. The question isn't whether conflict happens, but how you navigate it. Whether you stay regulated or become reactive. Whether you seek understanding or just seek to win. Healthy conflict requires both people to remain in their window of tolerance. When either person is outside that window, productive conversation isn't possible. This is why taking breaks during conflict is essential. Not as avoidance, but as regulation strategy. I'm getting too activated to think clearly. I need 20 minutes to calm down. Then I want to continue this conversation. Will you be available in 20 minutes? This communicates that you're committed to resolution, while also protecting the quality of the conversation by ensuring both people can stay regulated. During the break, use regulation techniques. Don't rehearse arguments or build resentment. Actually regulate your nervous system so you can return with genuine presence. When you return, start by acknowledging what's going well. I appreciate that you're willing to talk about this. I know it's uncomfortable for both of us. Then use I statements. I feel hurt when, rather than you always. This reduces defensiveness and keeps the focus on your experience rather than their wrongdoing. Listen to understand, not to rebut. When they're speaking, your job is to hear them, not to prepare your counter-argument. Repeat back what you heard to ensure understanding before responding. Seek win-win solutions. Not compromise where both people lose something, but creative solutions where both needs are honored. This approach to conflict transforms it from destructive to constructive. From something that erodes relationships to something that actually builds intimacy through vulnerable, honest communication, but it requires emotional regulation. Without regulation, you can't implement these practices. You default to defensive, reactive patterns. This is why regulation practice isn't separate from relationship health. It is relationship health, the foundation that makes everything else possible. Finally, let's talk about modeling, because your emotional regulation impacts others beyond your direct interactions. When you stay regulated in chaos, you're not just managing yourself. You're demonstrating what's possible. You're showing others a different way. Children especially absorb this modeling. They learn how to handle emotions by watching how you handle yours, not from what you say, but from what you do. If you preach patience but react with irritation, they learn reactivity. If you demonstrate regulation even when stressed, they internalize that capacity. But this extends beyond children. Partners, friends, co-workers, everyone learns from watching emotional regulation in action. When you stay calm in crisis, others often match your energy. When you respond thoughtfully instead of reactively, others tend to do the same. You become what Daniel Goleman calls a limbic regulator, someone whose emotional state helps regulate others' emotional states. This is leadership. Not through authority or control, but through embodied example, through being the emotional tone you want to experience in your relationships. This doesn't mean you're responsible for others' regulation. You're not, but your regulation creates conditions where others can more easily access their own. And over time, as you consistently show up regulated, relationships gradually shift, not because you've preached or pushed, but because you've modeled a different possibility. This is the quiet power of emotional mastery in relationships, not dramatic or flashy, but profoundly transformative. You can't control how others show up, but you can absolutely control how you show up. And your showing up regulated changes everything. Relationships become safer, communication improves, connection deepens, trust strengthens, not through manipulation or strategy, but through the natural result of bringing your regulated, present, genuine self to every interaction. This is what mastery looks like in the relational arena. Not perfection, not never being triggered, but consistently returning to regulation, consistently choosing awareness over reaction, consistently showing up as your best self even when challenged. And that consistency over time transforms not just your relationships, but the people in them. Including you. You become someone who doesn't just survive relationships but thrives in them. Who brings out the best in others because you've learned to access the best in yourself. This is the promise of emotional mastery in relationships, and it's entirely achievable through committed practice of the principles we've explored. Your triggers will still arise, but they'll have less power. Your reactivity will still surface, but you'll catch it sooner. Conflict will still happen, but you'll navigate it with more skill. And gradually, relationship becomes less about surviving emotional intensity and more about connecting authentically, communicating clearly, and growing together. This is what's possible. This is the path. This is what unfolds when you bring emotional mastery into the arena of relationship. And now, let's take this understanding into perhaps the most important relationship of all, the one with your children, where emotional regulation isn't just personal, it's generational, where mastery becomes legacy. Chapter 4. Parenting and Emotional Role. Modeling parenting is emotional leadership. This truth is simple but profound. Your children don't just learn from what you say, they absorb how you regulate yourself. Every moment you're with them, you're teaching. Not through lectures or lessons, but through demonstration. Through how you handle frustration, stress, disappointment, and joy. They watch how you respond when things don't go your way, how you treat yourself when you make mistakes, how you handle conflict with their other parent, how you navigate uncertainty and change. And they internalize these patterns, not consciously, but at a deep neurological level. Your emotional regulation becomes the template for their developing nervous systems. This is both sobering and empowering. Sobering because it means your reactivity impacts them far beyond the immediate moment. Empowering because it means your regulation work isn't just for you. It's a gift to the next generation. When you remain calm through their storms, you teach them how to handle life's challenges with balance. Think about what this actually means. When your child is having a meltdown, they're dysregulated. Their prefrontal cortex is offline. Their amygdala has taken over. They're overwhelmed by emotion they don't yet have the capacity to manage. In that moment, they need you to be their external regulator. Your calm nervous system helps regulate theirs. Your groundedness provides safety that allows their activation to decrease. But if you match their intensity, if you yell when they yell, panic when they panic, spiral when they spiral, you're not providing regulation. You're adding fuel to their fire. Two dysregulated nervous systems don't create regulation. They create chaos. This is why your regulation is so crucial in parenting. Your child's developing brain is literally learning how to handle emotion by co-regulating with yours. When you stay calm when they're upset, you're teaching them that big emotions are manageable, that intensity doesn't have to be scary, that they can trust themselves and you to navigate difficult feelings. When you react with frustration or overwhelm to their emotions, you're teaching them that emotions are dangerous, overwhelming, and shameful, that they can't trust themselves or you when things get hard. This doesn't mean you need to be perfectly calm all the time. That's impossible and actually not helpful. Children need to see authentic humanity, including the full range of emotions. But they need to see you handle your emotions with awareness and recovery. They need to see you feel frustration, pause, take a breath, and choose how to respond. They need to see you make mistakes, acknowledge them, and repair. This is what emotional role modeling actually looks like. Not perfection, but consciousness. Not suppression, but regulation. Not pretending you don't feel, but showing how to feel without losing control. Remember, children's emotional outbursts are rarely personal attacks. They're developmental expressions. This is absolutely critical to understand. When your 5-year-old screams, "I hate you," they're not making a thoughtful statement about your relationship. They're expressing overwhelming frustration in the only way their developing brain knows how. When your teenager slams the door, they're not trying to disrespect you. They're managing intense emotion with an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex and a very active amygdala. Their brains are literally under construction. The parts responsible for emotional regulation, impulse control, and perspective-taking won't be fully developed until their mid-20s. This means expecting adult-level emotional control from children and adolescents is neurologically unrealistic. They're doing the best they can with the developmental capacity they have. Understanding this transforms how you respond to their behavior. Instead of taking it personally or seeing it as defiance, you see it as a developing brain learning to navigate big feelings. This doesn't mean accepting destructive behavior or not setting limits. Boundaries are essential, but it means responding from understanding rather than from reactivity. Your job isn't to punish emotion, but to guide it. This is a fundamental shift in how most people think about parenting. The traditional approach sees emotional expression as something to control, suppress, or punish. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Go to your room until you can be pleasant. Big kids don't get scared. These responses teach children that emotions are bad, that they should hide how they feel, that expressing emotion leads to rejection or punishment, and this creates adults who can't regulate emotion, who suppress until they explode, who carry shame about their feelings, who struggle in relationships because they never learned that emotions are normal and manageable. The alternative is to guide emotion, to help children understand what they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and what to do with it. This sounds like, "You're feeling really angry right now. I can see that. It's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hit. Let's find a way to express that anger that doesn't hurt anyone." Or, "You seem really worried about tomorrow. That makes sense. New situations can feel scary. Let's talk about what's worrying you and what might help you feel braver." This approach validates emotion while teaching regulation. It says your feelings matter and make sense, and we can learn to handle them skillfully. In every conflict, ask yourself, what does my child need right now? Instead of what do they deserve? This question completely reframes parenting challenges. It shifts from punishment thinking to connection thinking. When your child is melting down in the grocery store, the punishment question asks, what consequence will teach them not to do this again? The need question asks, what's happening for them right now? Are they overwhelmed? Tired, hungry, overstimulated? What do they need to feel safe and regulated? These questions lead to completely different responses. The first leads to threats, removal, or isolation. The second leads to connection, understanding, and co-regulation. Research is clear. Punishment-based approaches might achieve short-term compliance, but they damage long-term emotional development and relationship quality. Connection-based approaches that meet needs and teach skills create secure attachment, emotional intelligence, and intrinsic motivation. But connection-based parenting requires tremendous emotional regulation from you. Because meeting a dysregulated child with calm presence is hard when you're triggered by their behavior. This is why your regulation practice isn't separate from your parenting. It is your parenting, the foundation that makes everything else possible. Let's talk about co-regulation, because this is the mechanism through which children learn emotional regulation. Co-regulation is when a regulated nervous system helps regulate a dysregulated one. It happens through proximity, tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and presence. When you're calm and present with an upset child, your nervous system literally communicates safety to theirs. Mirror neurons fire, breath synchronizes, heart rate variability increases. This is biological. It's how mammals are designed to help each other regulate. And it's especially powerful in parent-child relationships where the child's developing nervous system is actively learning how to self-regulate by co-regulating with you. But co-regulation only works if you're actually regulated. You can't fake it. Children's nervous systems are exquisitely attuned to your authentic state. If you're trying to appear calm while you're internally freaking out, they sense the incongruence and it actually increases their distress rather than calming them. This is why doing your own regulation work is essential, not just for you, but for your capacity to be a regulating presence for your children. The practice looks like this. When your child is upset, first regulate yourself. Take breaths. Ground in your body. Remind yourself that their emotion isn't an emergency. Then approach with genuine calm. Physical proximity if they'll allow it. Soft voice. Open body language. Your presence saying, I'm here. You're safe. These feelings are okay. We'll get through this together. You might not say anything at all. Your regulated presence might be enough. Or you might offer simple statements. I'm right here. You're okay. Let's breathe together. This isn't about fixing or stopping their emotion. It's about providing the regulation they don't yet have internally, so their nervous system can settle. And over time, thousands of these co-regulation experiences teach their nervous system how to self-regulate. They internalize your calm. They learn what regulation feels like. They develop the capacity to do for themselves what you first did with them. This is how emotional regulation is transmitted across generations. Not through instruction, but through repeated embodied experience. Let's explore different developmental stages, because emotional regulation looks different at different ages. Infants can't self-regulate at all. They're completely dependent on caregivers for regulation. When they're upset, they need you to regulate them through feeding, holding, soothing, presence. Responding consistently to an infant's distress isn't spoiling them. It's teaching their nervous system that the world is safe, that their needs matter, that regulation is possible. Toddlers are beginning to develop some self-regulation capacity, but it's very limited. They experience intense emotions and have very few skills to manage them. They need lots of co-regulation and simple emotional language. You're frustrated. That block won't stay. It's hard. Naming their emotion helps them start to identify and understand their internal experience. Preschoolers can begin to learn simple regulation strategies, but their capacity is still developing. Teaching them to take deep breaths, count to 5, or hug a stuffed animal when upset gives them beginning tools. But they'll need lots of support implementing these tools. Their prefrontal cortex is just starting to come online. They can't consistently use strategies without help. Elementary-age children have growing regulation capacity. They can learn more sophisticated strategies and are starting to understand cause and effect in their emotional experience. This is a good age for conversations about how different situations trigger different feelings and how different strategies work for different emotions. Adolescents are in a challenging developmental stage. Their brains are undergoing massive reorganization. Their emotional intensity is high, while their prefrontal control is still developing. They need more independence and less direct intervention, but they still need you as a regulating presence. The key is offering support without intruding, being available without controlling. Understanding these developmental stages helps you calibrate your expectations and responses appropriately. A 2-year-old's tantrum is developmentally normal. A teenager's emotional volatility is brain-based, not defiance. This doesn't mean accepting all behavior, but it means responding with understanding of what's developmentally appropriate, while still maintaining boundaries. Now let's talk about repair, because modeling repair might be the most important emotional lesson you can teach. You will mess up. You will react instead of responding. You will yell when you meant to stay calm. You will say something harsh when you're triggered. This is guaranteed. Parenting is the most triggering relationship you'll ever have because it touches every unhealed wound, every unmet need, every unresolved pattern from your own childhood. But these mistakes don't damage your children if you repair. In fact, seeing you repair teaches them something invaluable. Mistakes are normal. Relationships can handle them, and repair is always possible. Repair with children looks like this. I yelled earlier and that wasn't okay. I was feeling overwhelmed and I didn't handle it well. You didn't deserve that. I'm working on managing my stress better. I'm sorry. Notice what this does. It acknowledges the mistake, takes responsibility without excuses, recognizes impact on the child, commits to doing better, and explicitly apologizes. This models emotional responsibility. It shows that adults aren't perfect, that mistakes can be acknowledged, that relationships are resilient. Children who see repair learn to repair. They learn that mistakes don't mean you're bad, that apologies are powerful, that relationships can heal. Children who never see repair learn that mistakes must be hidden, that apologies are weakness, that relationships are fragile and easily broken. So paradoxically, your imperfect parenting with consistent repair is better for your children's development than perfect parenting would be, if that were even possible. Let's address generational patterns, because parenting often activates your own childhood wounds. You might find yourself saying the exact things your parents said that hurt you, or swinging to the opposite extreme, determined not to repeat their mistakes but creating different problems. This is because parenting triggers your own attachment history, your unhealed wounds, your learned patterns. When your child defies you, it might trigger your own shame about defying your parents. When your child is needy, it might trigger your own unmet needs for attention. These triggers can cause you to react to your own history rather than responding to your child's present reality. Breaking generational patterns requires awareness of these triggers and conscious choice to respond differently. This might mean working with a therapist to heal your own childhood wounds. It definitely means noticing when you're triggered and pausing before responding. It means asking, am I responding to my child or to my own history? What does this child in front of me actually need right now? This work is hard. It requires facing pain you might have spent decades avoiding, but it's the only way to prevent passing patterns to the next generation, and it's profoundly worth it. Because every pattern you heal in yourself is a pattern your children won't have to heal in themselves. Let's talk about the specific challenge of managing your emotions while setting boundaries. Children need boundaries. Clear, consistent limits help them feel safe and learn how to navigate social expectations. But boundaries are most effective when delivered from a regulated state. When you're calm, clear, and connected rather than reactive, harsh, or punitive. A regulated boundary sounds like, I understand you want to keep playing, and it's time for bed. I know that's disappointing. Let's go brush teeth together. Firm but kind. Clear but connected. The boundary is maintained while the emotion is validated. A dysregulated boundary sounds like, I said bed now. I'm tired of arguing with you. If you don't go immediately, no screen time tomorrow. Harsh, threatening, disconnected. The boundary might be enforced, but at the cost of connection and with the addition of fear or shame. The first approach maintains the boundary while building the relationship. The second enforces the boundary while damaging the relationship, and relationship quality matters more than immediate compliance. Children who feel connected to their parents develop intrinsic motivation and self-regulation. Children who are controlled through fear develop external compliance that doesn't generalize. So regulating yourself before setting boundaries isn't permissive, it's strategic. It's ensuring the boundary is effective long-term, not just in the moment. Let's explore the concept of emotional coaching, a research-backed approach developed by John Gottman. Emotional coaching involves 5 steps: noticing your child's emotion, seeing it as an opportunity for connection, validating the emotion, helping them label feelings, and setting limits on behavior while exploring solutions. This sounds complex, but it becomes natural with practice. Your child is frustrated with homework. Instead of dismissing, it's not that hard, minimizing, stop complaining, or fixing, let me do it, you coach. You seem really frustrated with this math problem. I get it, this is challenging. It makes sense to feel frustrated when something is difficult. It's okay to feel that way, and we need to finish the homework. What might help? Should we take a short break and come back? Should we work through it together? This validates emotion, maintains the expectation, and involves them in problem solving. Children who receive emotional coaching develop higher emotional intelligence, better self-regulation, stronger relationships, better academic performance, and fewer behavior problems. It's not magic. It's helping them understand and work with their emotions rather than fighting against them. But emotional coaching requires you to be regulated. You can't coach emotion when you're reactive, so again, your regulation work is the foundation. Now let's address a challenging situation. When your child's emotions trigger your own trauma or wounds. Maybe your child's anger triggers your fear because you grew up with a violent parent. Maybe their neediness triggers your resentment because your own needs were never met. Maybe their sadness triggers your helplessness because you were forced to be strong as a child. These are real and legitimate responses. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from repeating painful experiences. But your child's emotions are not your trauma. They're a child learning to navigate feelings, and they need you to differentiate between then and now, between them and whoever hurt you. This is advanced emotional regulation work. It requires recognizing when you're triggered, understanding why, and consciously choosing to respond to the present reality rather than the past pain. It might require therapy. It definitely requires self-compassion and patience with yourself as you do this difficult work. But it's essential, because your unhealed wounds will impact your children if you don't address them. Not because you're a bad parent, but because trauma responses are automatic. The good news is that parenting can be healing. Every time you respond to your child with the patience and presence you wish you'd received, you're healing both of you. Every time you break the pattern, you're creating a new legacy. Let's talk about the power of presence, because this might be the most important gift you can give your children. Presence means being fully here, not physically present while mentally elsewhere. Not half listening while checking your phone, but genuinely here, attuned, available. Children don't need your perfection. They need your presence. They need to feel that they matter enough for you to put down distractions and truly see them, to listen without planning your response, to be with them without agenda. This presence is regulating. It communicates, you're worth my full attention. You're safe with me. You're enough. But presence requires regulation. When you're stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, presence is nearly impossible. Your mind is elsewhere, preoccupied with problems. So creating conditions for your own regulation, adequate sleep, managing stress, maintaining support systems, isn't selfish. It's what makes presence possible, and presence is what matters most. Not the expensive toys, the perfect schedule, the impressive activities, but you, showing up, present, available, regulated. This is what children remember. Not what you bought them, but how you made them feel. Whether they could trust you with their feelings. Whether you stayed calm when they were upset. Whether you were really there. Finally, let's acknowledge the reality that parenting is hard, triggering, and exhausting. You're trying to regulate your own nervous system while managing your children's dysregulation, while meeting endless demands, while dealing with your own stress and possibly your own unhealed wounds. This is not easy, and pretending it should be easy only adds shame to difficulty. Parenting challenges you in every possible way. It activates every trigger, exposes every wound, tests every boundary, and that's actually the point. Parenting is an intensive personal growth program disguised as child rearing. It forces you to face yourself, to heal your patterns, to develop capacities you didn't know you needed, and while that's exhausting, it's also an incredible opportunity, an invitation to become the person you needed when you were young, to break cycles, to create something new. Your emotional regulation work isn't just for you. It's your gift to your children, your family, the next generation. Every moment you choose awareness over reaction, you're changing your family's story. Every time you repair instead of defending, you're teaching resilience. Every time you stay regulated through their storm, you're building their capacity to weather their own future storms. This is emotional legacy. This is how patterns change. This is what it means to parent with emotional wisdom. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but with consciousness, with commitment to healing, with the intention to be better than what came before. Your children don't need perfect parents. They need present, authentic, emotionally responsible parents who are doing their own work. And every step you take toward emotional mastery is a step toward being that parent. This is the power and responsibility of parenting. You're not just raising children, you're shaping how they'll regulate emotion for their entire lives. Make it count. Make it conscious. Make it the legacy you want to leave. Chapter 5. The Power of Neuroplastic Change Emotional. Mastery isn't a personality trait. It's a skill that rewires the brain through consistent practice. This statement holds revolutionary implications. It means you're not stuck with the emotional patterns you have now. It means your reactive tendencies aren't permanent. It means transformation is not only possible, but predictable with the right approach. For too long, people have believed that personality is fixed. That if you're anxious, reactive, or emotionally volatile, that's just who you are. That some people are naturally calm while others are naturally reactive and there's nothing to be done about it. Neuroscience has shattered this myth. Your brain is plastic. It's constantly changing, constantly reorganizing, constantly forming new connections based on your experiences and practices. This is neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to modify its structure and function throughout life in response to experience. And it means your emotional future is not determined by your emotional past. Your patterns can change, your reactions can shift, your capacity can expand. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, you are reshaping neural pathways. This isn't metaphorical. It's literal physical change in your brain structure. When you repeatedly practice a new response, pausing before reacting, breathing through activation, choosing perspective over automatic interpretation, you're creating new neural connections. At first, these new pathways are weak. The old pathways are strong, well-established highways in your brain. The new ones are barely there, trails through the forest. This is why change feels difficult at first. You're trying to use weak pathways while strong. Automatic ones are pulling you toward familiar reactions. But with repetition, something miraculous happens. The new pathways strengthen. The old ones weaken. The trail becomes a path, becomes a road, becomes a highway. And what once required tremendous effort becomes automatic, natural. Your new way of being. This is how people transform from reactive to regulated, from anxious to calm, from emotionally volatile to emotionally stable. Not through one insight or one decision, but through thousands of repetitions that gradually rewire the brain. Over time, staying calm becomes effortless, not because you're suppressing emotion, but because peace has become your natural state. This is the ultimate goal. Not having to constantly manage your reactions, but having regulation be your baseline. Your default. Who you are. But reaching this point requires understanding how neuroplastic change actually works, because not all practice creates change. The brain requires specific conditions for rewiring to occur. Let's explore these conditions in depth, because understanding them allows you to practice in ways that maximize neuroplastic change. First, focused attention. Your brain changes what you pay attention to. Attention is like a spotlight that tells your brain this matters. Strengthen this. When you practice emotional regulation with full attention, noticing sensations, observing thoughts, deliberately choosing responses, you're directing neuroplastic change. But when you practice while distracted, while your mind is elsewhere, while you're going through the motions without real engagement, minimal change occurs. This is why quality matters more than quantity. 5 minutes of focused practice creates more change than 30 minutes of half-hearted practice. Bring full attention to your practice. Notice everything. The sensation of breath, the quality of thoughts, the feeling of choosing a new response. Make the experience vivid, detailed, fully present. This vividness creates stronger neural encoding. Your brain learns more efficiently when experiences are rich and attention is full. Second, repetition. Neural pathways strengthen through use. One practice session creates minimal change. Daily practice creates transformation. Think of neuroplasticity like physical training. One workout doesn't create fitness, but daily workouts consistently over time completely transform your physical capacity. Similarly, daily emotional regulation practice completely transforms your neural capacity, not immediately but steadily, cumulatively, definitively. The key is consistency over intensity. Better to practice 10 minutes daily than to practice intensively once a week. The daily repetition creates stronger, more stable neural changes. This is actually encouraging. You don't need hours. You need consistency. Brief daily practice is sufficient to rewire your brain, if you maintain it. Third, novelty and challenge. Your brain adapts to challenge. If practice becomes too easy, too routine, too comfortable, neuroplastic change slows. You need to continuously challenge yourself at the edge of your capacity. Not so far beyond that you're overwhelmed, but not so far within that you're coasting. This progressive challenge is how capacity expands. You start with regulating mild emotions in calm environments. As that becomes manageable, you practice with more intense emotions. Then in more challenging circumstances. Then with more complex situations. This gradual progression builds robust capacity. You're not just learning to stay calm in one situation. You're developing generalizable emotional regulation that works across contexts. Fourth, Immediate feedback. The brain learns faster when there's clear feedback about whether an action was effective. In emotional regulation, this means paying attention to results. When you use a regulation technique, notice, did it help? Did activation decrease? Did clarity increase? This feedback helps your brain learn which strategies work for you. Because not all techniques work equally for all people, you need to discover what actually regulates your particular nervous system. Some people regulate best through breath, others through movement, others through cognitive reframing. Some need physical discharge of energy, others need stillness and quiet. Pay attention to what works for you. Your brain will learn faster when you're using techniques that actually create regulation rather than techniques that should work but don't. Fifth, emotional salience. The brain prioritizes experiences that carry emotional significance. Emotionally charged experiences create stronger neural encoding. This has interesting implications for practice. Practicing regulation during actual emotional activation creates stronger learning than practicing in calm moments. This doesn't mean you should only practice when upset. Calm practice builds foundational skills, but applying those skills during real challenges creates powerful neuroplastic change. When you successfully regulate through a triggering situation, your brain encodes that success strongly. It learns, this works. I can do this. I'm capable of handling intensity. These moments of successful regulation during challenge are worth 10 practice sessions in calm conditions. They prove to your nervous system that change is real, that you have capacity, that you're safe even when activated. Collect these victories. Remember them. Let them reinforce your growing confidence and capacity. Visualization, breathwork, and mindfulness accelerate this transformation. Let's explore each of these powerful tools for neuroplastic change. Visualization works because your brain can't fully distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. The same neural networks activate whether you're doing something or vividly imagining doing it. Athletes have used this for decades. Mentally rehearsing a skill improves performance almost as much as physical practice. The brain is literally strengthening the neural pathways involved in that skill through imagination. You can use the same principle for emotional regulation. Mentally rehearse staying calm in triggering situations. Visualize yourself pausing, breathing, choosing your response. Make the visualization detailed. See the situation. Feel the sensations in your body. Watch yourself implementing regulation techniques. Notice yourself staying grounded and responding skillfully. This mental rehearsal strengthens the neural pathways you'll need in the actual situation. When the real moment comes, your brain has already practiced the response. It feels familiar, accessible, possible. Practice visualization daily. 5 minutes of vivid mental rehearsal creates measurable neuroplastic change. Combined with real-world practice, it accelerates transformation significantly. Breathwork is perhaps the most direct way to influence your nervous system and create neuroplastic change. Your breath directly affects your autonomic nervous system, the system that controls stress response. Slow, deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, creating physiological calm. But breathwork does more than create temporary calm. With consistent practice, it rewires your nervous system's baseline. Regular breath practice increases heart rate variability, a measure of nervous system flexibility. It strengthens vagal tone, the activity of your vagus nerve, which regulates stress response. It reduces resting cortisol levels. All of these changes make emotional regulation easier. Your nervous system becomes more resilient, more flexible, more capable of returning to baseline after activation. There are many breathwork techniques, but one of the most effective for neuroplastic change is coherence breathing. Breathing in for 5 counts, out for 5 counts continuously for several minutes. This rhythm creates optimal coherence between your heart, brain, and nervous system. It's like tuning an instrument, bringing all your systems into harmonious function. Practice coherence breathing for 5 to 10 minutes daily. This consistent practice rewires your nervous system toward greater regulation. Capacity. Mindfulness meditation is the most researched practice for neuroplastic change related to emotional regulation. Thousands of studies have documented the brain changes that occur with consistent mindfulness practice. These changes include increased gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, improved executive function and emotional control, decreased gray matter density in the amygdala, reduced reactivity and anxiety, increased insula thickness, enhanced interoception and body awareness, stronger, connectivity between prefrontal cortex and amygdala, better, top-down regulation of emotion, increased activity in regions associated with attention and sensory processing. These aren't subtle changes. Brain scans show visible differences in structure and function after just 8 weeks of daily meditation practice. And these structural changes translate to functional changes. People who meditate regularly show improved emotional regulation, decreased anxiety and depression, enhanced focus and attention, better stress management, and increased overall well-being. The practice itself is simple. Sit comfortably, bring attention to an anchor, breath, body sensations, sounds, and when attention wanders, gently return it. The magic isn't in staying focused, it's in the returning. Each time you notice attention has wandered and bring it back, you're exercising the neural networks of attention and awareness. This simple exercise, repeated daily, rewires your brain toward greater presence, awareness, and regulation capacity. Start with just 5 minutes. Don't worry about doing it right or achieving any particular state. Simply sit, notice, return attention when it wanders. That's the practice. That's what creates change. Your brain evolves to match the emotional quality you practice most often. This principle is both sobering and empowering. Sobering because it means practicing reactivity strengthens reactivity. Empowering because it means practicing regulation strengthens regulation. Every moment is practice. Every response is training your brain. Every emotional experience is teaching your nervous system. When you react with anger, you're practicing anger. When you spiral into anxiety, you're practicing anxiety. When you collapse into helplessness, you're practicing helplessness. But when you pause before reacting, you're practicing awareness. When you breathe through activation, you're practicing regulation. When you choose response over reaction, you're practicing mastery. Your brain doesn't judge which practice is better. It simply strengthens whatever you repeat most. This means you have tremendous power over your emotional development. You're not at the mercy of circumstances or genetics or history. You're actively shaping your brain through your choices. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose the patterns you want to strengthen. Let's talk about the timeline of neuroplastic change, because understanding this prevents premature abandonment of practice. Neuroplastic change happens in stages, not linearly. Stage 1, weeks 1 to 3, conscious effort. Everything feels difficult. You forget to practice. You notice how reactive you still are. This is the hardest stage where most people quit, but critical changes are already beginning. New neural connections are forming. Your brain is starting to recognize alternative responses are possible. Stage 2, weeks 4 to 8, glimpses of progress. You catch yourself slightly sooner. Regulation feels marginally easier. Results are still inconsistent, but you're beginning to notice change. Neural pathways are strengthening. The new responses are becoming more accessible. You're building momentum even if it doesn't feel dramatic. Stage 3, weeks 9 to 16, noticeable improvement. You regulate more often than not. Skills that required intense effort now feel more natural. Others might comment that you seem different. This is when new pathways have become strong enough to compete with old ones. You're at a tipping point where change accelerates. Stage 4, 4 to 6 months. New baseline. Regulation has become your default in many situations. You still have challenging moments, but they're exceptions rather than the rule. The new neural pathways are now well-established highways. They're your brain's preferred routes. Change has moved from conscious effort to natural expression. Stage 5, 6 to 12 months. Integration and stabilization. Regulation feels effortless in most situations. Your nervous system has recalibrated to a new baseline. Peace has become your natural state. This is when transformation is complete at a neurological level. Your brain has been rewired. New patterns are consolidated. Change is stable. Understanding these stages helps you persist through the difficult early weeks, knowing that change is happening even when you can't see it yet. Trusting the process when results feel distant. Most people quit in stage 1 or early stage 2 because they don't see dramatic results. But they're abandoning practice right before it would have gotten easier, right before the momentum would have built. Stay with it. Trust the timeline. Your brain is changing even when you can't feel it. Let's address obstacles to neuroplastic change because understanding them helps you navigate around them. Obstacle 1. Inconsistent practice. Starting and stopping prevents neural consolidation. The pathways start to form, then weaken when practice stops, then start to form again. This creates a cycle of beginning but never progressing. The solution is commitment to consistency regardless of how you feel or what's happening in your life. Make practice non-negotiable. Like brushing teeth, something you do regardless of circumstances. This consistency is what allows neural pathways to stabilize and strengthen. Obstacle 2. Practicing while distracted. Going through motions without engagement creates minimal change. The solution is quality over quantity. 5 minutes of full engagement beats 30 minutes of distracted practice. When you practice, really practice. Be fully present. Make it count. Obstacle 3. Insufficient challenge. Staying in comfort zone prevents growth. Your brain needs progressive difficulty to adapt. The solution is gradually increasing challenge. As regulation becomes easier in one context, practice in more difficult situations. Keep yourself at the edge of capacity. Obstacle 4. Expecting linear progress. Getting discouraged by plateaus or temporary regressions leads to quitting. The solution is understanding that skill development is never linear. Plateaus are normal. Temporary setbacks are part of the process. Stay committed through the waves of progress. Obstacle 5. Lacking social support. Isolation makes change harder. Brains are social organs that develop in relationship. The solution is finding support, whether through friends, family, community, or professional help. Share your journey. Let others witness and encourage your change. Now let's explore the role of sleep in neuroplastic change, because this is often overlooked but absolutely critical. Your brain consolidates learning during sleep. Neural connections formed during the day are strengthened and integrated while you sleep. This is why sleep deprivation so dramatically impairs emotional regulation. You're not just tired, you're preventing neural consolidation. Your brain can't integrate the new patterns you're practicing. Sleep is not optional if you want neuroplastic change. It's essential. Protecting sleep quality and quantity is part of the practice, not separate from it. Aim for 7 to 9 hours nightly. Keep a consistent sleep schedule. Create conditions conducive to quality sleep. Dark, cool, quiet environment. No screens before bed. Relaxation routine. This isn't about perfection, but it is about prioritizing sleep as the foundation for neural change. Without adequate sleep, even excellent practice creates limited transformation. Let's talk about the power of identity shift in neuroplastic change. Your brain organizes around identity. When you see yourself as an anxious person or someone with anger issues, your brain strengthens patterns consistent with that identity. But when your identity shifts, when you begin to see yourself as someone developing emotional mastery or a person who stays calm under pressure, your brain begins strengthening different patterns. This is why affirmations can be helpful, but only if they're believable. Saying, "I am completely calm" when you're highly reactive creates cognitive dissonance. But saying, "I am learning to regulate my emotions," or "I am becoming someone who pauses before reacting," is believable. It acknowledges where you are while pointing toward where you're going. Your brain can work with that. It can begin strengthening patterns consistent with this developing identity. Notice your self-talk. How do you describe yourself emotionally? Are you reinforcing the old identity or supporting the new one? Shift from "I'm so reactive" to "I'm learning to regulate." From "I can't handle stress" to "I'm building my capacity to handle stress." From "I'm broken" to "I'm healing and growing." These shifts in language create shifts in identity, create shifts in neural organization. Your brain follows your sense of who you are. Finally, let's acknowledge that neuroplastic change is not just about your brain. It's about your whole nervous system. Your nervous system extends throughout your entire body. It includes your gut, which has more neurons than your spinal cord, your heart, which has its own neural network, and networks throughout your tissues. This means body-based practices are essential for neuroplastic change. Movement, yoga, dance, martial arts. These aren't just exercise. They're nervous system training. Trauma and chronic stress get stored in the body. Purely mental practices may not access these somatic patterns. Body-based practices release stored tension and rewire embodied patterns. Include movement in your practice. It doesn't have to be intense or structured. Walking, stretching, gentle yoga. Any mindful movement helps integrate neuroplastic change throughout your entire nervous system. The power of neuroplastic change is this: you are not fixed. You are not stuck. You are not doomed to repeat your patterns forever. Your brain is designed to change. Your nervous system is capable of rewiring. Your emotional patterns can transform, not through wishful thinking or one-time insights, but through consistent, focused practice that leverages the brain's natural capacity for change. Every moment of practice is an investment. Every regulation success is evidence. Every day of consistency is rewiring. And over time, weeks to months of committed practice, transformation becomes undeniable. You've changed at a neurological level. You've become someone new, someone who can handle intensity, someone who stays grounded in chaos, someone whose natural state is regulated, present, peaceful. This is not fantasy. This is neuroscience. This is what becomes possible when you understand neuroplasticity and commit to the practices that harness it. Your emotional future is unwritten. Your brain is waiting for instructions. Your practice is the instruction manual. Write the story you want to live. Build the brain you want to have. Become the person you're capable of being through consistent practice, through patient repetition, through trust in the process of neuroplastic change. This is your power. This is your path. This is what becomes possible when you commit to transformation. Chapter 6. Living as an emotionally unshakable person, emotional. Mastery transforms not just your reactions, but your identity. You become someone who radiates calmness in chaos, compassion in conflict, and strength in uncertainty. This isn't about perfection. You'll still feel anger, fear, sadness, frustration. You're human. Emotions are part of being alive, but you'll feel them differently. You'll experience them without being possessed by them. You'll honor them without surrendering to them. You'll become someone who can stand in the storm and remain unshaken, not because the storm doesn't affect you, but because you've built an inner foundation so strong that nothing external can topple it. Your peace becomes contagious. Others feel safer and more grounded around you. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of emotional mastery. Your regulation doesn't just benefit you, it elevates everyone you interact with. When you remain calm in crisis, others often match your energy. When you respond with wisdom instead of reaction, others tend to do the same. When you hold space for difficulty without adding chaos, others feel permission to do likewise. You become what psychologists call a secure base, a person others can turn to for stability when their own world feels unstable. Children feel safer. Partners feel more supported. Friends feel more understood. Coworkers feel less stressed. Not because you're managing their emotions or fixing their problems, but because your presence itself is regulating. Your groundedness provides an anchor when others are adrift. This is emotional leadership, not through control or authority, but through embodied example. Through being the calm you want to experience in the world. This is emotional freedom, the ability to experience every emotion fully while remaining in control of your inner world. Freedom doesn't mean the absence of emotion. It means the presence of choice. You no longer chase calmness, you are calmness. You don't try to control the world. You control your mind and the world follows. This shift from doing to being is profound. Early in the journey, regulation feels like effort. You're constantly managing, monitoring, intervening. But over time, regulation becomes your natural state. You're not trying to stay calm. Calm is simply who you are. You're not working to maintain perspective. Perspective is your baseline. This doesn't happen overnight. It's the culmination of thousands of choices, hundreds of practice sessions, countless moments of choosing awareness over reaction. But it does happen. And when it does, you discover something remarkable. You've become free. Free to feel without being controlled. Free to respond without being compelled. Free to be present without being overwhelmed. This freedom is your birthright. This capacity has been within you all along. You've simply learned to access it, develop it, embody it, and now, living as an emotionally unshakable person, you understand, emotional mastery isn't about reaching a destination where you never feel challenged. It's about knowing that no matter what arises, you have the capacity to meet it, to feel it, to work with it skillfully. You trust yourself completely, not because you'll never struggle, but because you know you'll always find your way back to center. This self-trust is the ultimate fruit of the practice, the knowledge deep in your bones that you can handle whatever life brings. Not because life has gotten easier, but because you've become stronger, more flexible, more resilient, more whole. Living as an emotionally unshakable person means showing up each day with this foundation, this inner stability, this unshakable trust in your own capacity. You bring this presence to your relationships, to your parenting, to your work, to every interaction and every challenge. And in doing so, you don't just transform your own life. You transform the lives of everyone you touch. Your children learn what emotional resilience looks like. Your partner experiences what it means to feel safe with someone. Your friends discover they can trust you to stay grounded when they can't. This is the ripple effect of emotional mastery. One person's regulation creates space for many people's healing. So as you continue this journey, and because it is a journey, not a destination, remember this: you're not doing this work alone. You're doing it for yourself, yes, but also for everyone whose life intersects with yours. Every moment of practice, every choice for awareness, every time you pause instead of react, all of it matters. All of it creates change that extends far beyond you. You are becoming someone the world needs. Someone steady in chaos, someone wise in conflict, someone present in a distracted age. This is your path. This is your practice. This is what it means to live as an emotionally unshakable person. Not perfect, not without struggle, but grounded, aware, present, free. And from that freedom, everything becomes possible. Not because external circumstances change, but because your relationship to them has transformed. You've discovered the truth that the ancient wisdom traditions have always taught. Peace isn't found in external conditions. It's cultivated in the inner world. And once cultivated, once established, once embodied, nothing can shake it. Nothing can take it away. This is the promise of emotional mastery. This is what awaits you on the other side of consistent practice: an unshakable mind, a peaceful heart, a life lived from center. Welcome home to yourself. Welcome to emotional freedom. Welcome to the rest of your life, lived from this place of inner strength. You've always had this capacity. Now you know how to access it, how to develop it, how to live from it. The journey continues. The practice deepens. The transformation unfolds, and through it all you remain unshaken, unbroken, whole. This is who you are. This is who you're becoming. This is the life that begins now. Summary: the path to emotional mastery. The emotionally unshakable mind is about mastering your emotional world through awareness, neuroscience, and mindful practice. It's a guide to living with inner strength, emotional clarity, and unbreakable peace, even in the face of stress, conflict, or uncertainty. Throughout this journey, we've explored the essential truths of emotional mastery. That emotional reactivity is not your enemy. It's simply an unconscious pattern that needs your conscious attention. That your brain is plastic, capable of rewiring itself through consistent practice toward calm and clarity. That relationships are the arena where emotional mastery is tested and proven, where your regulation transforms not just your experience, but everyone around you. That parenting is emotional leadership, where your own regulation becomes the template for the next generation's capacity. That neuroplastic change is real, measurable, and achievable through specific practices applied consistently over time. And that living as an emotionally unshakable person isn't about perfection. It's about presence, awareness, and the freedom to experience all emotions without being controlled by any of them. These aren't just concepts. They're practices, tools, pathways to transformation. And the transformation begins the moment you commit to it, not when you feel ready. Not when circumstances are perfect, not when you've healed every wound or resolved every trigger, but now, today, in this moment. Because emotional mastery is not a destination you reach someday. It's a practice you commit to today and every day after. It's the daily choice to pause before reacting, to breathe through activation, to observe emotions without being swept away by them. It's the consistent practice of mindfulness, breathwork, and conscious response, the patient work of rewiring neural pathways through repetition. It's the courage to stay regulated in relationships even when others are chaotic. The wisdom to set boundaries. The strength to repair when you make mistakes. It's the commitment to modeling emotional health for your children, to breaking generational patterns, to creating a legacy of regulation rather than reactivity. And it's the trust that your brain is changing. Your nervous system is recalibrating, your capacity is expanding, even when progress feels invisible. This is a lifelong practice, not a single skill. There is no finish line, no moment when you've arrived and never need to practice again. But that's actually the beauty of it. Each day brings new opportunities to practice, to deepen, to strengthen your mastery. And each day of practice makes you more capable, more resilient, more free than the day before. The science is clear. The path is proven. The transformation is possible. Your emotional patterns are not fixed. Your reactive tendencies are not permanent. Your capacity for regulation is far greater than you've realized. You have everything you need to begin. The knowledge, the tools, the capacity. What remains is the choice, the commitment, the daily practice. Will you choose awareness over automaticity, regulation over reactivity, presence over distraction? Will you commit to the practices that rewire your brain toward calm, to the daily repetition that transforms patterns? Will you trust the process even when progress feels slow? Will you persist through the challenging stages? Will you give your brain the time it needs to change? These are the questions only you can answer. These are the choices only you can make. But know this: every moment of practice matters. Every conscious breath. Every pause before reacting. Every choice for awareness. All of it is rewiring your brain. All of it is building your capacity. All of it is moving you toward the life of emotional freedom you seek. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to transform overnight. You don't need to never feel reactive again. You just need to practice. Consistently. Patiently. With trust in the process and compassion for yourself. And if you do, if you commit to this path with genuine dedication, transformation is inevitable. Not because I promise it, but because neuroscience guarantees it. Your brain will change. Your patterns will shift. Your capacity will expand. This is the power of neuroplasticity. This is what becomes possible with committed practice. An unshakable mind. A regulated nervous system. The freedom to feel everything without being controlled by anything. This is your potential. This is your path. This is what awaits you on the other side of consistent practice. The journey begins now. Not someday. Now. With this breath. This moment. This choice. Choose awareness. Choose practice. Choose transformation. Your emotionally unshakable mind is waiting, not in some distant future, but in this present moment. In the space between stimulus and response, in the pause before reaction, in the breath that calms your nervous system. It's always been there. You're simply learning to access it, to strengthen it, to live from it. This is your invitation, your opportunity, your moment. Take it, commit to it, live it, and watch as your entire world transforms. Not because external circumstances change, but because you've changed your relationship to them. This is emotional mastery. This is inner freedom. This is the life that begins when you choose to build an unshakable mind. The choice is yours. The power is yours. The transformation is yours. Welcome to your new beginning. Welcome to emotional mastery. Welcome to the rest of your life, lived from unshakable inner peace. Thank you for taking this journey. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because emotional mastery isn't just personal transformation, it's a gift we can give to each other. Your practice matters. Your transformation matters. Your regulated presence in the world matters. Start today. Practice daily. Transform gradually. Live freely. This is the path, and you're ready to walk it.